This week, Seemant Sehgal from Breachlock is with us to discuss pen testing as a service. Then, in the security news, an exploit that makes you more secure. Pardon the interruption. Water heater company is in hot water. IoT devices are vulnerable. Squeegee and RDP scraping. Free laundry for everyone. Wi Fi routers and Apple AirTags. North Koreans fill US IT positions. Take out drones. The NVD backlog. IBM is no longer a security company. And DNS bombs. All that and more on this episode of Paul's Security Weekly. This is a Security Weekly production for security professionals by security professionals. Please visit securityweekly.com/subscribe to subscribe to all the shows on our network. It's the show where exploits run wild, packets aren't the only things getting sniffed, and the cocktails flow steady. It's Paul's Security Weekly.
Application Security Weekly delivers interviews and news from the worlds of AppSec, DevOps, and all the other ways people find and fix software flaws. Join us as we explore how the latest news highlights modern security practices or reminds us of the missing ones. We also bring insights from interviews on topics from training to threat modeling, from open source tools to cloud-native techniques, plus an occasional reference from new wave to synthwave. Find us at securityweekly.com/subscribe or look for Application Security Weekly wherever you pick your podcasts.
Coming to you from Purgatory Studios in semi-high definition, compliments of Darth Vader himself. This is Paul's Security Weekly, episode number 830, being recorded on Wednesday, May 22nd, 2024. Quick announcement for everyone. Dive into cybersecurity with Cyber Risk Alliance for exclusive insights from the RSA Conference 2024. Explore executive interviews with industry leaders. Uncover visionary perspectives on threats and strategies. Delve into curated articles on trends and innovations, equipping yourself with essential knowledge for today's cyber landscape. Visit securityweekly.com/RSAC for expert guidance and inspiration on navigating cybersecurity challenges confidently. Today, we're talking about pen testing as a service. We're excited to have with us, well, first off, Mr. Josh Marpet. Josh, welcome.
Thank you. Always a pleasure.
Mr. Bill Swearingen.
Hey, Paul. Nice seeing you again.
Yeah, good to see you, Bill. And our guest for this segment is Seemant Sehgal, the founder and CEO of Breachlock. He founded Breachlock with two things: 18 plus years of experience in the cybersecurity industry and a dream to create a solution that would make cyberspace safer. As former head of security at ING Bank, where he held a multi-million-dollar cybersecurity budget, he dealt with the pain of traditional pen testing approaches falling short of what modern businesses today need for a strong security posture. A go-getter by nature, Seemant was motivated to solve these pain points for people walking the same shoes, and he went on to create the world's first full-stack pen testing solution. Seemant, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Paul. Pleasure being here.
Yeah, it's nice to have you. Seemant, I guess get started. How did you get your start in information security?
Oh, wow. That's a long, long way ago, right? So, like you said, I've been in the space for close to 20 plus years now. And basically, my entry into information security back in the day, security back in the day was checkpoint firewalls. That's how long back.
That's where I started. Yeah.
That's where
Awesome.
I started as well. And basically, I had delved into software, I've delved into networking. Nothing was exciting enough for me as a kid coming out of college. And then somebody just showed me a DNS zone transfer hack on my college website, and that was it. All light bulbs, went on, and then I went a little bit deeper into it with the sub 7 Trojan, playing around with my friends, going down the memory lane, and eventually, it all boiled down to the good versus the bad fight. That's the thing that got my attention, because here you had an adversary, and there was a feeling of I could be the hero saving the world. And that's how I got into information security. Obviously, life got a lot more serious when I got into different kind of standards, and I got my hands into pen testing in IBM back in the X-Force days. And the rest is history. And here I am founding a company that's been in the market for about 6 years now. So yeah, I started as a hacker. I think I'm still a hacker at heart. and being at conferences and speaking to practitioners, that still keeps me going, and speaking to people like you. So great to be here today.
Awesome. Go ahead, Bill.
Yeah, so I think that's awesome. So, Samant, I think there was definitely a sweet spot, like people of a certain age, right? Like when you mentioned sub seven and those kind of things, and when I look back at my history, there was definitely a time where like where hacking kind of started, and the nobody really knew how to detect and protect against these kind of things, and it was just kind of the wild west, right? And kind of like, so when you were talking about that, like the light bulbs going off, and uh, just like how that felt, and like that exploration and all of those kind of things, like that resonates with me. But I kind of feel like kids today, they may not get to see those kind of things, because the FBI and the cops didn't know back then either, right? So things are definitely different now. But
Yeah. Yeah.
Simon,
And to
it
tell
said in
you a story,
go ahead.
so
No,
tell
go
you a
ahead.
story to that. Now that we're talking, Bill, about the good old days, I remember, in my final year in the college, I did not know anything about the subject that they were asking me questions on, and this was like a live session. And I remember this, telling the guy that was interviewing me. I said, hey, you know what, just to hack him out of the discussion, I said, before we start with that, I want to show you there's something really wrong with the college servers, and here it is. And I showed him like 4 or 5 cool hacks, and I was like, huh? And
yeah.
that hijacked the whole conversation and gave me really good grades. So yes, you're right. I mean, the awareness was pretty low and the excitement was pretty high back in those days. So I could
Man, we're
totally relate to how you feel about it.
we're not even 10 minutes in, and you're already like admitting to crimes. I love it. Like,
Right.
so
Statute of limitations. That's
yeah.
it.
Yeah.
Simon, it says in your introduction that you found pen testing was falling short. Can you elaborate on that in your experiences running a security program? And what were the specific things where you felt pen testing was falling short?
Right. So this is more than anything else, this is out of respect for the bright hackers, right? I mean, the way I look at hacking is like, you show somebody a system, you build that system all your life thinking it'll do X, and then somebody just comes in and tells you that no, this can do Y, right? So for me, that takes a lot of intelligence, intellect, creative thinking. And when I was paying all these bright guys at the bank that I worked for, I had like a glass office with the team sitting outside at the best brains in the market that I could get. And, watching their screens, it got me thinking, because every day they were looking at the same data set, and basically as a human they were interacting with that data set and making a decision if this is a true finding or a false finding, right? And going from there, they would then maybe club two things and then get to another finding. And I thought, like, that's a lot of repetition from analyzing a data and getting to a conclusion, right? um, and the only thing that was changing was the target for them, right? Be it an internal network or what, if it's an active directory, it's an active directory, and then it's like 10 things you would do and combine them and move to the next thing. I did appreciate the combining and that human decision making that leads to creativity. But what I could not appreciate is the repetitive tasks that I was making them do, right? And that's where this hunch was born, that why is pen testing done the way it is done today? Only because shocks happened and some accounting firms got into the security business, but they were supposed to be accountants, so they built this consulting model around it. But it's still a technology problem. I mean, I'm not talking about an accounting or a legal, like a lawyer problem. So why do I need to put the same business model on it? And the truth be told, it's never going to be automated or completely technology driven, because you can't automate thinking, the creative process. So I held on to that element. Go ahead, Josh.
Well, that's it. That's the one piece that I was waiting to hear. You cannot automate thinking. And
Mm,
Oh,
that
yeah,
is
yeah,
why you just got 20 brownie points in my book, man. Because it says
yeah,
on your
yeah,
website, we do a
yeah,
combination of manual and automated because you can
yeah,
automate a lot of stuff. Just like you're saying, you can automate a lot of stuff, but you cannot automate the
yeah.
human brain.
but I
No,
think the elephant
I'm
in
going
the
to show
room
up.
is there's some contention amongst those in the community about using any kind of automation or automated tools in the context of a pen test. And I've experienced this throughout my career. Quick example, I used to use Core Impact when I would do CTFs, and people would get really mad at me. And I'm like, but the attackers are using probably the same tool because they stole it or similar tools. So what, what's the big deal? We still have to defend it. So what's the contention, do you think, Simon?
I know, just to add on to that, Paul, because I speak to a lot of practitioners, a lot of CISOs are
Mhm.
my friends, and when you drop in the word AI now, after
Yeah.
Gen AI happened, the
God.
sensitivity goes 10 points higher to what you
Mhm.
said, right?
Yeah.
What used to happen with you at the CTFs. So here's the point of contention, right? I mean, it's this whole emotion that where Josh gave me the 10 extra brownie points, right? Because
Mm.
truth be told, it cannot be automated, right? But that doesn't mean it cannot be made efficient,
Yeah.
right? I'll give you an AI example here, and that'll make things easier. Like, you don't have to put a extremely bright human brain on a problem like this, and the problem is this: we know that if it's a personal email account on a website, then that's susceptible more to a targeted phishing or a spear phishing attack, a corporate email ID, than something like accounting or finance, right? Because then I can research you, I could know what's happening in your life, I could target the message, and truth be told, again, one fine day anybody would fall for that, right? It just depends on that emotional moment where they're able to make a connect and make you do something that you think is the right thing to do, but actually it isn't, right? So now imagine if there's a corporate website of a bank that's got presence in like 60 countries, and it's got like these 500 email IDs because of whatever reasons on deeply embedded pages on that website. I'm not going to put a pen tester to go through those 500 email addresses and then bifurcate them on this is a personal, this is a non-personal. I can train an AI model to do that,
Mhm.
right? If I give it enough data, even if it's synthetic data, it can make out what's like John at bank.com versus accounting, North America at bank.com, right? So that's a simple example. I think people get worked up because then it contradicts with that mindset where we've seen this built as a consulting business, and there's
Yeah.
nothing wrong with it. I think there's another thing that I've heard, right? It's like, hey, you're just giving me a nessus report by
Right.
putting a label of pen testing on it. I think so these
Mhm.
are mix of these historical things that we are all brought up with in the industry that kind of hold us back with that emotion to forego innovation or efficiency that technology can bring in, with just that plain simple emotion, hey, you're selling me something automated and calling it a pen test, you know Uh, uh,
Yeah, but but it sounds like the overall strategy is to have automated tools that create data sets and then train models that make sense against those data sets to pass off to a human.
yeah,
Because,
exactly.
I mean, I can remember going through Nessus reports manually and going, I'm not necessarily looking for the critical findings. I'm looking for those lows and mediums that I can string together in
Exactly.
using a more sophisticated attack. But wouldn't it be great if there was a machine learning model that was trained to look at a Nessus report and go, here's where I think the best paths are to save me the time from going through every single finding in the report.
Right. And again, if you look at that problem, the classic Nessus problem, or we're just mentioning Nessus here, but any vulnerability scanning tool, right? I mean, what's the difference in the end? It's the proof of concept, right? Like the hacker would stack it all
Right.
up and say, hey, this is the criticality because here's the evidence of first step, second step, third step, boom, I see a gap. Right? That's the basic difference between scanning and what we call as pen testing, and some people call it red teaming and whatnot. So, if somehow you could bridge that gap on the simpler vulnerabilities, then you could basically, what you have is a lot of time at hand of a pen tester to find more complex flaws, right? I'll give you
Mm,
another example here. The email example was one, but think about this. You know, clickjacking. Why do I need to embed like for a human to embed an iframe and then see if clickjacking is possible on this or not? I can just again train a model to see if if it's this background over this background. If you see a match or a mismatch, you can make a decision X or Y. So these are simple ideas, I think.
mhm.
And I like that you bring it up, the whole people get worked up, and also with the core
Yeah.
impact example that Bill gave. I can totally relate to it, but I think to the benefit of our CISOs now, there's a lot of awareness that's gone in the past 5 years. So this part of the discussion is getting easier. People are adapting it more. And also, I think when people ask me, Paul, like, can pen testing be completely automated? What, it's a very broad statement, right? Like, that's a very broad statement, because what are you pen testing in the end? If
Mhm.
if it's your Unix or my Unix, my configuration could be different than yours, but your Unix and my Unix is the same. Now switch that to an application which I built and you built. We both do e-commerce. You sell soccer balls, I sell bottles, but that app is a different beast, at both ends. So, people that are not practitioners, I
Mhm.
think they fall into the trap where they're not able to see through the noise. And if it's network pen testing, I can understand. I mean, people have made progress with that, right? And you could do that at scale. But if there's a new variant of a pass the hash attack that somebody came up with, or if it's a 0-day exploit in the wild, I mean, good luck with it. I mean, your automated pen testing solution cannot think of that unless some engineer there thinks of it and then builds a signature or embeds an exploit, right? So there will always be this gap.
It's really interesting you say it this way because, and by the way, Paul, to what you said earlier about automation, blah, 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 blah. Show me a pen tester that doesn't use a vulnerability scanner. And, no, 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 no. Please go do it manually. And they'll be like, well, it'd take me days. Then shut up about automation.
Yeah,
Okay, just shut up.
yeah.
Well, and I think the term vulnerability scanner today is very broad. I think pen testers have their suite of tools that they use that are more targeted vulnerability scanners today, based on the type of penetration test and based on discovery. I'm going to use specific tools that automate certain parts of my job. So they may say, "Well, I don't use a vulnerability scanner," but you're using tools that are basically highly specific vulnerability scanners in
Yeah,
your testing.
they're using a vulnerability scanner of one type or another. That's an
Or another.
automated.
Yes,
Yeah.
correct.
So
Yeah, like
now,
Nuclei is a great example where it allows you to automate basically certain tasks and template them.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So,
Yeah.
but the point is that automation is part of our world. Now, if you use automation smart in a really intelligent way, you're going to make your life easier, faster, cheaper for the customer, and you're going to also break that point in time problem. And that's what I'd like to talk to you about, Samant, is the point in time problem. How do you think that and I call them, by the way, I call them exploitability scanners. I don't call them automated pen testers. Okay, there's vulnerability scanners. Here's a vulnerability. Then there's an exploitability scanner, which says, I think that vulnerability is exploitable. And then there's a human that can say, and this is my definition, please feel free to mangle it if you choose. The human can say, and here's the risk that brings to the business.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And that's what I think the human brings to the table. All right. But I mean, how do you see the point in time problem being helped along by Breachlock and others like yourself?
I know where you're getting at this, Josh, and I speak to a lot of CISOs because that's where I'd like to get my, when I was on the other side of the table, I was having that information firsthand because I was evaluating vendors. I was seeing what's changing in the market, how these silver bullet marketing jargons are coined and then, pushed into the market. And again, I'm going back to my memory lane now from, the detection tools to SIM to correlation to APT and so on. I've lived through that whole silver bullet era. Every 2 years we have this habit of changing that. But to your point, you know there this whole notion of continuous pen testing, right, which is where you bring in the point in time. When
Absolutely.
I speak to the CISOs, they love the idea at the outset that, okay, fine, I can have a automated network pen testing
Right.
And they understand that this is network pen testing, it's not your whole stack, right? They love that idea, but what I've heard is that after they use it for a while, 9 of 10 CISOs then realize that this is just another tool in their briefcase, which
Yeah.
means you still need human experts to make good use of it, whether it's a BAS solution or an automated pen testing solution. And that's one big reason, Josh, that I have maintained and held my ground that at Breachlock we would keep things hybrid, right? We have a ton of automation on our side, but we don't want to take the human out of the loop, right? It's that simple as that. And if we do, I mean, we do have as a part of our ESM module, so we do both PTaaS and ESM, right? And
Right.
within ESM we do give a dashed module where you could do gray box, web application automated pen test, if you will, or an external network pen test, if you will. But we clearly state that this is not a replacement of your pen test. In a network pen test,
Right.
you have to see if you could get to the active directory. You have to see if you could move laterally. What if I find a SharePoint, I drop a spreadsheet which says holidays, and the moment somebody opens it up, maybe there's a good old macro that still works somewhere, and that connects back to your CNC. There's a whole there's a plethora of attack trees that a hacker can make in their mind. And I mean a good hacker here, right? That I look at okay, this is a retail organization, this is a banking organization, this is a energy, oil and gas. So I can come up with those attack trees in my head, and that's the creativity part that no tool is going to ever bring onto the table. And linking it back to my earlier comment, if CISOs are tuned in or if practitioners are tuned in, they will know what I mean. At the end of the day, it feels like this is just another tool in my briefcase, and I always I can run it, but to get real value, I need an expert, right? So, and then what's the point? Why did you take out the human in the first place, right? Then the vulnerability scanners were already doing a good job.
Well, but okay, so I'm going to actually answer your question because I think there is an answer to that question.
Mm-hmm.
We're not taking the humans out of the loop. Anybody that says I can take the humans out of the loop, I kick out of
Totally
my office.
agree.
I'm done with them.
Yeah.
Okay. Because I need the human to understand risk. Look, it's the same reason that a SIM is a correlation engine, not a causation engine. They cannot determine causation. They can only determine correlation. They can
Correlation.
tell you there's a relationship. I have no idea what the hell the relationship is or how it happened or what caused it, but I know there's a relationship, or I think there's a relationship to a 0.7 certainty or whatever. But they're not causation engines. And just like Breachlock and some of the other competitors are out there. And I had an argument with one of your competitors on Reddit not long ago, by the way. It was hilarious. I'll show you the link afterwards. But I explained my viewpoint that it is vulnerability scanners, exploitability scanners, and that what happens is you make a human pen tester more efficient, and you can alert them when there's a potential problem for a human pen tester to come in and say, that is a problem. Here's what we need. Here's what you need to do about it right now. And it becomes an
But
incident.
also, I don't want to downplay automation because you kind of mentioned that you have like a attack surface monitoring or management aspect to your product as well, and that has value because
Yeah.
there are certain things that automation will find that I don't need necessarily a pen test. I do. I need a pen tester for the other scenarios we're talking about, but if it's a known exploited vulnerability and it's internet facing and I didn't know about it before and something can tell me about it, I don't need a pen test. I need to go fix that now, right? If it's on the CISA known exploited vulnerabilities list and it's externally internet facing in my environment, I need something constantly looking for those things. And I need a team that has a process to respond to those things. And that's where a lot of organizations are getting hit today. We've seen a lot of these breaches with VPN appliances
Yes.
being exposed to the internet and tons
Yes.
of remotely
Yes.
exploitable things. So
Yes.
you need that automation.
Absolutely. And Paul, you bring 2 points here. I think one we all agree on, because we are, in the space for quite some time now. You said about ESM, right? Recon in the hacking world was always an automated process.
Yep.
I can't remember, even 15 years ago, if I was doing a pen test, I never did a manual recon. That step has always been automated, whether it's a angry IP scanner or a port scan. I mean, show me one pen tester that's doing one port at a time and writing
Mm.
code for each port. It doesn't work like that. So obviously there was an evolution of recon into what you'd call today ESM, right? But the catch there is, Paul, your other point, which is constant. They want to do it
Mhm.
continuously because it makes sense, right? And if you go back again, a few years back in your memory lane, then you also had like, hey, but why, when we had this bug bounty revolution, right? I remember this time frame when everybody was talking about putting a responsible disclosure policy on your website, right? And there was like, hey, how can you do that as a hacker? How? Yeah, dude, like hackers are doing that to you anyway, so bug bounty does make sense, right? Because they won't take your permission. I mean, people are doing port scans all the time. So
Mhm.
now you just put a policy on your website and somebody reports and you say that, oh, you are allowed to do this and not that, right? But it was always happening. So I think the continuous element is what led into this EASM market. And there were other problems. I'll quote you a few examples from my practical experiences in the CISO's office, right? So let's say if there was a log4j coming out, or even simple, let's say if two applications were talking to each other and they broke, and somebody investigated why that connection broke, and they found out it was an SSL certificate. It's that expired, right? Internal self-signed certificate that expired. That isn't even a security problem. Yes, it is from an availability perspective, right? But it's not a in particular security use case. But if you pick up any ESM tool today, and that would be a feature that it'll offer, right? It'll tell you like certificates that are expiring, or what is the inventory of my certificates. So I think it's this constant urge of knowing what's happening on your attack surface, how it's expanding because of shadow IT, because of cloud. I think it was like, the it was a necessity to make it a continuous approach, and that's how the whole ESM market was born, and it evolved. But for me, as a pen tester, back in the day, I did recon, and now somebody just put it in a SaaS application and calls it an ESM platform, right? And we,
Now,
we do that too.
I wanna advocate for having a human involved because I think that's important in one particular challenge that we have, in many challenges, but in this particular one, it's that the impact of a vulnerability changes over time.
Yeah,
And one of the ways it changes over time is the exploitability. And we can go through the whole list. Vulnerabilities disclosed, there is no exploit. But then there is an exploit. Then there's a better proof of concept. And then someone figures out how to make it work more reliable. And these change over time. So how do
absolutely.
I constantly assess the risk to my organization when that's changing? And the CVSS score basically has to be updated for that vulnerability. But
Fully
like
agree.
who goes back and does that double checking? The way to get that answer and solve that problem, I think, is having a human involved.
It is, but I think the flip side of that is, if you have a live wire of a data, right, coming in from different sources. Look at a platform like ours, for example, and I'll give you an example here too. So let's say there was an organization X, and we did raise a medium CSRF token missing from a login page. Yeah, fine,
Mhm.
it's missing, it's a best practice, but what can go wrong? So somebody put it on the back burner, say, okay, I will solve it in the next release, right? And then let's say from a live data feed perspective, I now find a cross-site scripting that I can use to combine with the CSRF,
Mhm.
send a logged in user a link, steal their cookie.
Mhm.
And there was also another cookie replay option available to me. Then I basically reach an account takeover without even getting there in the first place. There's no straight shooting to that, right? So I agree, a human would need to combine all of those things and test
Right.
it. But from a proactive security perspective, if you will, I think data can really help, because they get, a machine can understand patterns a
Right.
lot faster than a human can, right? So I think it's both sides. And once we start taking uh, a non-objective approach to, okay, this is what I'll use automation for, and this is what I will use humans for, I think that's where we kind of limit our options, you know uh,
Yeah, I know, but I like that because I've seen a lot of scenarios where I'm like, oh, well, that medium severity bug by itself, not a big deal. But
exactly.
I'm like, if there was another vulnerability or two that were to exist there, wow, the impact just went
Just went
through the
up.
roof. Like I've seen this with like BMCs, for example. I'm like, oh, well, that's not a big deal. I'm like, but if there was another vulnerability and then an attacker was able to gain a foothold, they could leverage the other vulnerability. Like, well, now they have complete control of your server and all the hardware that's attached to it. Like,
Yeah.
that's
But
your
Paul,
impact just went through the roof.
Yeah.
hackers don't actually chain vulnerabilities together. It's not like that would ever happen.
They, in a lot of circumstances now, they have to.
I know.
I
I know.
mean,
I'm joking.
security has. I mean, some of the kernels and operating systems have been hardened, like Android, where often in iOS, where oftentimes you do see they have to chain vulnerabilities together
I
to
think
get
he was
around
making a
protections.
joke, Paul. I think
Yeah, I
he
know.
like yeah, yeah.
I
I
know.
was
I was
being
trying to just take the wind
sarcastic.
out of his sails.
You succeeded.
And and actually, what's interesting is, speaking of chaining, you're talking about people. How many companies only patch, only remediate, only work on criticals and highs,
Mm,
That's right.
and how
mhm.
many of those chain vulnerabilities are mediums? Because nobody ever touches a medium. Let's be honest.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's to that point, Josh. Before I started Breachlock, like I studied about 50 hacks that happened, right?
Okay.
And I was really hoping to see something great, uh, that was very hard, and was
Mm,
very, of course, Stuxnet and all. Like I wanted to see more stuff like that, right? I will tell you, man, like there was like CVEs in a Word document that could be passed 6 months from then, and that led to a, a bank heist. I
mhm.
was like,
Yep.
gosh, how can you? And then people say like you do pen testing, but you only find these patches missing. Yeah, dude. I mean that's what's going to cost you the next hack.
Yep.
And hackers are not stupid. If they find low hanging fruits, they will go in for that. Why do I have to work hard and create that hack of the millennium to be able to get a foot in the door when you leave the front door open, right?
Yep.
So it's on the both sides. You can use automation for finding those kind of stuff, yes, and you can use humans to find the more creative stuff, but we also have to be honest and ask us like, okay, when these breaches happen, what is the cause 9 out of 10 times? Is it that CVE that was left unattended for about 3 to 6 months while somebody could have, and like a medium like Josh was already pointing out to, and somebody made use of it with another vulnerability, and they got a foot in the door, right? So I think there's
Oh,
like more than few ways you can approach this, but no matter how you do it, you can't be either on the automated side or on the human side. You have to use both.
so
Yeah.
I
Agreed.
think I think you're being too nice when you say 3 to 6 months. So I
Mm,
do incident response for my real job, and I completely agree with you. 9 out of 10, 9 out of 10 cases they are. I don't want to say like boring, but like it truly was a exploitable vulnerability on that VPN that's existed for 2 years, right? And you wonder how this happens. And so but kind of going back to like when you guys start talking about the automation and people, I think what's missing, and you guys have kind of hinted, but what the reason why you need people is you need that creativity, right? And Paul, you hit on it too, but the understanding of risk, because when we
Yes.
start talking about a medium severity vulnerability, that medium may be high in your environment because of other factors, right? And that I think is it in my experience, and I don't know if you disagree, if anybody disagrees. I think that's the problem that's missing from automated tools is that understanding of the risk as it pertains to that specific environment. And I don't, maybe tools exist now that take that into consideration. I'm just not aware of that. So
And you're right, Bill, because the whole industry is going off CVSS
mhm,
calculators, right? I mean, and to its advantage, it does take factors into account, like you can do this remotely, or you need authentication and whatnot. But there's no calculator in the world that can calculate risk for your business,
that's right.
and that's where your point stands true. I mean, you need a human to be able to factor all those things in, And at breachlock, what how we tackle that, I'll just give you an example there. Like, we have a separate section in each report which says pen tester context,
Mm.
right? So we let the automation do what it does, and it would give it a default risk rating. But then there's a place where pen tester can write the story, add more screenshots, and tell you that why they think, in their independent opinion, it's a certain risk level, and the business can still reject it, but we allow the creativity of the pen tester to take a shot at that, right? And I've seen, like, our clients appreciate that a lot. they they,
Yeah.
they like
You
to see the contrast.
you
I
don't
I have a
appreciate
I have kind of a funny story about that. Back in the day, I observed a vulnerability in RDP in the environment that allowed an attacker to basically sniff the credentials, right? Go way back early 2000-ish timeframe. And I brought it to the Windows administrator group, which was fairly new. I mean, this is back in the time where, like, not that long before this, we had made the transition off of Novell into Windows and Active Directory, right? So this, RDP was vulnerable back
I know
then.
which RDP you're talking about, but go.
Yeah. And the admins, I mean, to their credit too, they're like, look, this is Microsoft's approved tool for managing systems. They're like, why should we change or, like, really truly dig into the configuration when this is what Microsoft recommends? And they're like, we need proof. I'm like, all right, let's do a test. And so we did set up a little test. I sniffed the password, showed them the password, and then they made the changes to remediate the issue. And that story always resonates with me about the value of pen testing and the value of the human in the pen test. And so I think, Simon, what you've built, right, is that at scale, right?
Yes.
That allowing people to understand the true impact of some kind of vulnerability or exposure.
Spot on, because when I made this transition from being the buyer to being on the other side of the table, of course I asked myself, like, okay, fine, I mean, it's out of respect to the hackers because they are doing repetitive tasks, but what is the business problem I'm solving in the end, and why isn't it solved until the end? These are the questions that I asked myself. So two words came out of it, right? One was speed, the other one was scale, right? And speed, because it takes 3 months to get somebody on board, 2 months to complete the
Yeah.
pen test. By that time, somebody declared the application legacy and they are not putting any money into it, or they're
Hmm.
moving environments, right? So that was one. Second was scale, right? Because it was so expensive, both from time and money perspective, to and there's a reason for it. I'll explain you why it was expensive. Because then if you have a big four coming, right, they would send you a document and you would see fine 5 lines there for the rate card, right, and it goes all the way up to the partner. I said, damn, I'm looking for a hacker. Why do I need to look at a partner to do the QA? I'll do the reports in my own template, so you don't get into a legal issue that you need to review my reports. I understand technology. I can see if there's a bug or there's not, right? So this is the notion that we were coming off from, and that was creating hurdles for both speed and scale, right? And now to the scale, add the whole manual process of Word documents, and these poor pen testers are told, your dots and commas are not in place, and the images need to be resized. I mean, this whole damn thing can be done in a system
Mm.
because it's repetitive, right? So those are the problems that I started off with. Like, how can I take out the repetition, so that they get excited, they want to look for complex flaws, and then the scale was, okay, now you put this speed into a system that can then replicate itself, right, and solve the scale problem. And if you look at bug bounty or all these crowdsourcing methods that you have, what is the problem that they're solving at core? It's scale.
Right.
But have we really solved that problem? Because casting a wider net on the human resource with the crowdsourced workforce, I mean, the problem is still on the table. You haven't solved it. You just create an illusion that, okay, fine, I can source more people and hence I can scale it, right? But
But there's no guarantee that those people will pay more attention to your bounties in your program. And
no,
that's not a knock on bug bounties. They are valuable, I believe, and
they are.
have their place, right? But it doesn't guarantee that they're gonna look at that. And I think, but a lot of the value in the bug bounty is the structuring of the program and having an outlet or inlet for responsible disclosure,
Yeah.
right? That
Yeah.
in I think industry wide, right? Maybe attackers are more likely to do a bug bounty program than keep it for themselves or sell it or whatever. So there's, I mean, there's value there. I think probably more so for a product company than for an enterprise. I think
Exactly.
if I'm the CISO of an enterprise, yeah,
Yeah.
I may have bug bounties, but that's
Yeah.
not. I'm
Yeah.
not relying on that for my everyday. Someone should be looking at my entire network and footprint and
Yeah.
attack surface and then telling me about stuff that I didn't know about before or helping me reprioritize my efforts, right? Is that the value? Is the prioritization of remediation? I think in hearing you talk, Samant, that's if I was a breach lock customer, I would go, yeah, I want to know about the things I should be paying more attention to because that's a huge struggle today.
Prioritization is certainly one, but now that you mentioned, I'd also like to draw a parallel with this whole bug bounty thing, how it came about, what it's suitable for, and where, because everything has pros and cons to it, right? So I agree with you. For product companies, bug bounties makes a ton of sense, right? And this is linking back to the value that we bring onto the table, and we have got like 1,000 plus clients now. So why did we get all those clients in the past, you know, close to 6 years now? So the reason for that is with the bug bounty, if you look, the model is flawed because you are rewarding people to find bugs, right? It's not the end product of what the risk posture of this company looks like. You are
Right.
rewarding people to find bugs. Now, think about any smart person. If they find out how to find this cross site scripting, it's what they know, then they're going to repeat that one trick pony on,
Mm-hmm.
50 web applications. So you are not incentivizing them to go out of the way and find complex flaws. You are
Right.
incentivizing them to play that one trick pony or 10 trick ponies, whatever they know of, because they want to make money. That's how you're incentivizing them. So yes, it works for the product models, and there's another reason why it doesn't work for enterprise, which is where breach lock comes in, right? So I had a very big temptation to open my platform to the crowdsourced
Mm-hmm.
universe, because then I could also create that illusion that, hey, I've solved the scale problem, right? But then there is an inherent problem with that model, right? And the problem is most CISOs are either black on the black or white side of this, right? There's no gray in between. Most CISOs that I meet don't want a Uber kind of a hacker driving through their production network, right? And I'll prove it to you with the fact that, let's say if a bank is awarding breach locker contract, we get a 50-page vendor assessment form which is only aimed at one thing: who are your people, how are they vetted, where are they residing, what laptop do they use, what
Mm-hmm.
practices. They even ask us like, what's the insurance. It goes on. It's
Mm-hmm.
like a 50-page document, right? And now, if you go to the crowdsource model, there's an inherent gap that you would never be able to fulfill, because this is a floating human resource economy that's one day on a beach. There's pros to it, but this is also the con to it, right? So we've chosen to be on the other side. We only have in-house pen testers, and yes, we understand speed and scale as an issue, but we're trying to solve it with technology, not by crowdsourcing. And I'm not
Right.
changing.
But the value there is if I have a service like Breachlock and I have a bug bounty program, I'm checking all the boxes, right? I'm wiping out the easy cross-site scripting things, so I'm forcing the bug bounties to find the really more weird
Yeah,
esoteric things, probably paying out. I don't know if you're paying out less, but you're paying out for things that someone put a lot of work into, not just recycling a cross-site scripting, because Breachlock is
absolutely.
telling me if I've got cross-site scripting. Yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely. Because look, you said about product companies, right? Why does it make sense? It makes sense because then it's not a production unit yet, right? So I'm
Right.
exposing it to the outside world, so I can go out with less risks as
Right.
against more risks. Makes total sense. And let them break it apart,
Mm-hmm.
because there's nothing to lose. You didn't start the battle yet, right?
Right.
But,
Right.
but, but if I have, social security numbers or credit card data
Mm-hmm.
or banking, GDPR, CCPA sensitive data where regulations come into the play, then I'm thinking twice if I am, giving it to a bug bounty person, right? With the login credentials. I'll give you a practical problem, and that will demonstrate this, right? So we were we were working with a blockchain company recently, right? And they were integrating with a banking company,
I'm sorry.
and and
Hmm, hmm, hmm.
we had to test that, and they wanted our testers to give their personal information to create those accounts because it was possible. I said, hell no, I'm not doing that, right? So think about this practical scenarios. How are you going to handle that with somebody that you don't even know and you haven't met? I mean, all
Right.
you've seen is a picture and a LinkedIn profile and a few certificates, and you think that person is going to abide by every rule in your book. I mean, it's hard to get employees to
Mm,
abide by all the rules that are in your
There
book.
are there are companies that have dealt with that scale problem. Like I happen to know Bug Crowd, Casey Ellis. They have scales of their testers. They have the general crowd, then they have their US only crowd, then they have their referenced and checked US only crowd type of thing. So
Yes,
they have different tiers. It's possible to do, but you're absolutely correct. Scaling that is a bitch. And I was actually at
exactly.
White Hat Security with Jeremiah Grossman when he had and Arian Evans when they had the Threat Research Center, and they were trying to scale pen testing by training. Like there was one guy there who all he knew how to do was cross-site scripting. That's it. That's all he knew. He didn't even know what SQL injection was.
mhm.
Okay. But he could spot cross-site scripting anytime, any day, anywhere, any place. They were trying to make almost robots out of people. And it just it worked for a while, but it didn't scale as well as they thought it would.
And you're
But that
right. Casey and team are doing an incredible job as well. But they also started as a bug bounty, and now they have a PTaaS offering. So there you
exactly,
go. You
exactly.
know,
Well
uh,
said. Well said.
Yeah, because they're solving different problems, I think, is what we're coming down to, right?
exactly. Yeah, and you need everything in the mix, guys.
Yeah.
Like if you go 5 years back, you didn't have all that you have on the table now with all the automated pen testing, BAS, PTaaS, EASM. This is all like in the last 10 years, right? So I
Well,
think
and technology stacks have certainly you have more technology in more different places. You've got some in the cloud, and that's a whole different, bag of tricks in the cloud that you deploy in a million different ways. You've still got on-premise infrastructure. You still have users with computers or some kind of computing device, right? So like your attack surface is vastly different from what it was 20 plus years ago.
and it is, and guess what, it's going to stay that way because
Mhm.
the world is changing on the outside and the world is changing on the inside, and you
Yeah,
know
it's interesting to think about where computing goes from today and how that impacts our pen testing and assessments, right? I think there's a starting to see more of it now, people advocating for Chromebooks and Android and iOS devices as the primary computing device, and it still hasn't quite taken off.
no,
Apple's recent offering gets a little closer, but not quite, right?
that's true, and endpoints have been a big pain area in
Mm.
the enterprise world, and couple it with the phishing topic that we were discussing
Yeah,
earlier.
you still have people with accounts. You have identities, right? And it doesn't matter what computing device they're using. We still have the identity problem. And to go back to what you said about attackers are taking the path of least resistance. We all know from experience, sitting here on the show today, that we go after credentials in some capacity. We're abusing credit. With I mean, that's the first step because it's reliable. I'm not worried about is that vulnerability in the right configuration. Am I able to do this exploit? It's more reliable to go, well, you left default credentials hanging out on a device on the internet, right? That's such a reliable way to gain access to a system.
Yeah, yeah. And this is always going to be the case, Paul. And if you look at, again, we've been here long enough. And if you look back at history, truth be told, the innovation will always be ahead and security will play catch up. I wish
Yeah.
it could be the other way around. But, I've been here about 2 decades now. I didn't see it happening, right? And you see it unfolding now when people come and ask me, okay, we've got a LLM solution, we've got Gen AI, how do you pen test it, right? And
Mm.
so you see, we are also catching up from an, and it will always be the case. Maybe that's what we need to accept. So you're right. I mean, these things are here to stay because the more we move ahead, innovation, technology, the threat landscape is always ahead in the game.
Right,
And
but how we use it too, I think is also important, and we've seen so much discussion about using Gen AI, not just the security or insecurity of the LLMs, but now how do I use that as a tool to get better? And you mentioned machine learning
Yeah.
earlier, but are you integrating LLMs into your suite? I think probably every security vendor out there, the one I work for included, everyone's looking at how can I use this as a tool to make my product better,
Yeah.
right? And I think we're just in the beginning of that.
So I always go back to my customers. I'm
Mhm.
big on users. I want to hear them out, like what they think, and in the end, I'm not there to launch that marketing campaign that everybody's talking about. I want to know
Sure.
what problems they have. So two answers to that. One is Breachlock has been using NLP based AI models
Mhm.
for 4 years now, right? So the whole LLM discussion that did not excite us from
Right.
that angle, right? Because we thought, okay, we can build these models and we can take out the decision making from a human perspective on some vulnerabilities, and
Yep.
that's like vulnerabilities that you see all the time, right? So it does save a lot of time on the desk of the pen tester to find complex flaws. So that's one. Second, on the Gen AI, when I was speaking, especially at RSA this year, I spoke to a lot of CISOs, and where we think mutually we can deploy Gen AI and LLMs is they've got a ton of data, even offensive security data, right?
Mhm.
And the CISOs now want to know, because they get these questions on their desk that they didn't think of, one night before when they were sleeping, when they open their email box, like, okay, this vulnerability is coming, how many assets have this SSL certificate expiring between this and
Mhm.
this with an underlying technology and this vulnerability, like 3 dimensions, right? Now good luck with putting all of that into spreadsheets and making pivot tables to get the answer, right? So that's where breachlock is now looking at, if we could have some experiments on synthetic data first, and see how we could build an interface like that could
Mhm.
chew on all these patterns and give them the answers that they're looking for in the war zone, because it's all about time, right? If you could reduce that response time, and Bill will appreciate that, right? If from an incident response perspective, it's important, how much time do you lose to get to the subject,
So,
right? Because
building risk prioritizations based on the risk rating of various patterns of data, and then using those to guide remediation and testing, even testing and then remediation, because these are the patterns that we see that are monstrous amounts of data about this pattern.
exactly.
That pattern would have huge risk uptick for us as an organization and a business. Let's focus our testing there on our OT environment, on our mainframe, on our whatever.
Yeah.
And then once you get it down to where those pattern, that's interesting stuff. I like
But I like the certificate and keys example, Samant, because I think one of the things that
that.
we've seen, and I've even read about recently, where in 2008 there was a bug in OpenSSL and Debian, and folks generated keys from that, but never went back from 2008. Never went back to discover and find which keys have been generated using the bug in the library that resulted in a weak key. How do I go find all the weak keys in my environment? Is that even an exercise that many are doing really well today, because it's a vulnerability, but it's not a traditional one in a software sense. Like there's a key, and there are similarities. Like, my discovery in response to that is probably pretty similar to a generic vulnerability in software, but it's still kind of a unique problem.
Exactly. And Gen AI and LLMs can help there, right? Because we're
Yeah.
talking about, and I've lived through all these problems, because I remember the heartbleed and the
Heartbleed.
SSL
Yep.
shock, and because when you're talking at enterprise scale, guys, I mean, it's like multiple countries,
Yeah.
multiple CMDBs that, some things are not classified, some things are not recorded properly. So then you need to look at multiple data sources, because you can't go by the only data source that you're pointed towards as an incident responder, right? So then I need to club the vulnerability data. I need to club the pen testing data. I need to club the CMDB. I need to club the risk reports, and then I can make these connections and find out the stuff that I would otherwise miss. And I think that's where these large data sets processed through LLMs could potentially, benefit the security community. But I have not seen that happening yet, but
Yeah.
as long as there are hackers, there is hope.
Right. It's a great statement. Great quote. Seemant, I just, we're running short on time, but I have just 5 questions left for you. Ready to play 5 questions with Security Weekly?
Go ahead.
3 words to describe yourself.
Passionate cybersecurity nerd.
If you were a serial killer, what would be your weapon of choice?
Doing good to others and kill
I-
them with goodness.
If you wrote a book about yourself, what would the title be?
Explorer.
What is your favorite hacker movie?
Independence Day. Because it's the good versus the bad and
Nice.
everybody coming together.
Choose 2 celebrities to be your parents.
Alive, dead, fictional, or otherwise.
That's a tough one. Well, Tom Cruise and Angelina Jolie.
There you go. Seemant, thank you so much for coming on Paul Security Weekly. I do want to say that this was a sponsored interview. You can find more about BreachLock. I don't have the link in front of me. Seemant, do you know what the link is?
www.breachlock.com.
There you go. Just go there. Go there and sign up. Do you have like a demo service they can sign up for, or?
Yeah, they can schedule a demo. And there's a ton of
Awesome.
information on the internet. We're all over the place. So it wouldn't be hard.
Awesome. Thanks so much for appearing on the show today.
Thanks, Paul. Thanks, everybody.
Coming up next, stay tuned for the security news.